Okay, here we are. This is the final episode of our 10-part series. Myself, Pastor Joel Webbon, and Dr. Stephen Wolfe, and we have been talking about all things Christian nationalism, following roughly the outline of your book, The Case for Christian Nationalism, but it's not just following the book. So for those who read the book, I certainly wouldn't conclude that, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. I think there's a lot of things beyond the book that we've discussed. You can
buy a t-shirt, by the way.
Yeah. Really? That. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. So you could buy the t-shirt, but I think we discussed things, beyond just the scope of the book that were fascinating. By virtue, if nothing else, by virtue of the fact that I'm on the show also and can't help myself.
You can kind of say whatever you want. It's your show, right? You could talk about America, throw in the Antioch Declaration.
I did. Our last episode, we did the Antioch Declaration. Probably our spiciest was episode 4. We got into Israel, and somehow I like what you told me last night. You're like, Joel, I don't know if it actually correlates. My response was, but were you not entertained? But I tried to. In the 4th episode, we talked about Israel, and I did a silly little trope and comparing it to Atlantis, and so lots of fascinating things. I think many helpful things, all of them interesting things. But in our final episode, in the name of the spirit of helpfulness, we wanted to get really practical and move away from the political philosophy, move away from some of the theology. Some of that will be here, I'm sure, but we just wanted to try to raise and answer the question, okay, if I'm sold and Christian nationalism is the way to go, how do we do it? Where do we go from here? Because I think that's, I'm a post-mill guy, you're all-mill. But some of the post-mill guys, not all of them, Ogden, they're post-mill. And I think they're more like me. Andrew Isker is post-mill. He's more like me. A.D. Robles. But there are some post-millennial guys who they have a really clear picture in their mind of Z, and they know what's happening presently, A, but B, C, D, E, F, like there's not a whole lot of, it's just other than personal evangelism and maybe God sends revival. And we get enough regenerate hearts that everybody they'll vote in the kingdom of God. And that's one of the things I think that appealed to me with Christian nationalism. I am still post-millennial in my eschatology, but I liked Christian nationalism because of its practical helpfulness. Like I felt like the Christian nationalist guys were a little bit less of the persuasion of this is going to happen in 50,000 years. Instead, the Christian nationalist guys were saying, we can't promise it's going to happen, but we think it could happen. And by God's grace, there's actually clear steps that we can take. It could happen even in our lifetimes. And that's appealing to me. So if we could talk about some of those steps that in our lifetime that could make a serious difference for our kids. Yeah.
This is the question of what to do next that is the hardest question for me to answer. I wrote the book, it's 10 chapters, an intro, and then I get to the end and I'm thinking, okay, they're going to want to know, what do we do now?
Right.
You've somehow made it through 400 pages of this book. Now I need something practical of what to do. And I have to admit that I did not know what to say because it's a different question. Like the question of whether or not, there'd be civil government before the fall, like that's something I can tackle. But then in the real world with the complex dynamics, with the left controlling the institutions, with a lot of eager people to do something in their own individual sphere, their own vocation, it was something that I didn't, at the time, 2 years ago, I did not feel prepared to answer. And even to this day, it's still a difficult thing to address. And so when I wrote the epilogue, it was me just sitting down and typing out a bunch of thoughts. And then I got 39 or 40 of them, and I said, that's all I got. But in there, I did say, like, hey, this is not just my thing. Like, I say something effective. We need the political theorists. We need the foot soldiers. We need the popularizers. We need the average guy who's got a plumbing business or a landscaping business. Like, we need those guys. We need the military officers. We need all these people in their different various vocations to think through of, what do I do now? So I think a lot of what we're going to talk about now it has to be contextualized at the individual level. You have to think, but so so there are some thoughts I have, and I'm curious what you think as well. I think that, like they say, there's like an epidemic of a sort of loneliness.
Yes.
I don't know if that's a younger generation. It's not something I've experienced. I married kind of young, and so, but I know among a lot of young people there is that sort of thing, and there's also a feeling of isolation. Even if you're married, you discover Joel Webbon and you start listening to him, and you become convinced of patriarchy, and you listen to me, and you can become convinced of Christian nationalism. And your wife it's harder to get her on board with that, especially if you're in your 40s or whatever it is. And so people feel very isolated. So one thing I would say, and it's one thing I'm doing, is that every other week I meet with a group of guys. We have an email list. It's like 30 people. And we discuss, ordinarily we discuss an American Reformer article. And we usually get off topic within 5 minutes. But the idea is that we're coming together and we're generally like-minded, and we develop friendships, and we learn what this guy does and what he does, and you can use their services if he does this or that, and you start the networks, and then you find out that this guy knows this guy, and so it's a way for you to gain friends of like-minded people, so you're not just stuck on the internet with your anon friends, which is good, it's just fine, but it's good to have it in person. So if you're able, and there's a location, just meet every other week. So that's just a simple thing, but in terms of the friendship, like that's been really great. And you learn a lot, like just the average guy, you learn like a huge amount from that guy. So that's one piece of advice I'd give.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we, similar. So yeah, I would certainly agree with that. You have to have relationships, because so much of, right now, among the new right, the dissident right, the whatever, I think some of our friends in Moscow called it the dank Reich, like not even right but Reich.
Yeah.
The dank right with a T. I actually like that one. I'm happy to. I was like, hey, fun. That's pretty cool. I
mean, like dank memes. That's an old old internet thing. So now they're bringing it back.
Yeah. So
dank right's not so bad.
But anyways, whatever you want to call it, Christian nationalist. Our guys, our team, the people like Moscow, Ogden, Orrin McIntyre, guys who like his show, guys who listen to you, listen to me, listen to Contramundum, CJ, and Isker. So anyways, if you're guys like that, my point is that there's a lot of camaraderie, there's a lot of collaborating, but so much of it really is online. And so I'm just saying all this to affirm what you said. That's not enough. Now, I think that is helpful. I don't want to disparage that, because people will always say like Twitter's not real life, X is not real life, and I know what they're saying. I think that in one sense that is true, because there's a whole swath of a type of person that I think is probably the majority of people who aren't on X. At the same time, though, I've made real life relationships from X. Like it is real life, at least in some regard, because there's guys who I now have spent time with, and I wouldn't know them otherwise. And so it's like X is, I think, a great place. Not only the Colosseum, it's not really the public square. It's not discourse. It's battle. It's war. So it's the Colosseum. You go there to fight, and as Christians, we want to fight well. But that doesn't just mean we want to fight, in a moral fashion. But we want to fight well, meaning like we also would like to fight and win. And so doing both, fighting in a moral manner and fighting in a victorious manner, actually being efficient and successful. But another purpose, I think, of X is the fight and pushing ideas forward and pushing on the Overton window and permissible discourse, expanding that. But also, it's a great place not for friendship, not to have friends, but to make friends. And so I would say, for guys who are on the dissident right, who follow us, in some ways it's less important. Your interactions with Stephen Wolfe, or Joel Webbon, It's more so down in the comment thread, your interactions with each other, you know, and then following each other, and then DMing each other, and networking with each other. This is why conferences matter. I mean, all the content you can find online, you know, like who cares about, you know, what, like why do people go to conferences? I think it's just to, even if it's just 2 days out of the year, is to remind yourself that you're not alone, that you're not crazy, that there's actually real flesh and blood people, and it's not just bots on the internet, but like they represent real people who actually agree with you. You know, it's to maintain sanity. And so I think, you know, use X. My point is use X, use conferences, use these venues, but remind yourself that these things aren't sufficient to have friendship, but they can be highly effective to make friendship. And then upon making the friendship, then create some other kind of context. So like I created, you know, and I have plenty of friendships, but for the sake of others, I created a cohort, and of guys who were following me, and some of the, you know, the people who were most participating the most, and commenting the most, and sharing my posts the most, and I like found a way to kind of collect these guys, got about 100 of them, and got their emails and reached out. And now they're all, and set up a trip. And I said, hey, you know, like I'm willing to do, if you guys are interested, and they were all eager, but like I'm willing to do a quarterly Zoom call with all of us, where I'm not talking the whole time. I'm talking, but we're all able to correspond. 2-hour Zoom call once a quarter, and then interactions, you know, whether it's a group chat or whatever, on a more daily basis, and then an annual trip. And so we've got all these guys that are coming actually in January. So by the time this airs, that will have already passed. But I'm excited. Like they're going to come and spend a weekend, come to church on Sunday, arrive on Friday, and we're just going to, you know, hang out and smoke cigars. And there's not really much of an agenda. We'll talk about social media strategy, but then we're also going to talk like practically about, like, you know, business and stuff, and like, hey, so you're a lawyer, and this guy needs a lawyer, you know, or you, like, you're doing this thing, you're 5 years into your landscaping business, you're 1 year in, you know, and like, and so those kinds of things. So anyways, I think you're right, is friendship is key. The social internet friendship is not sufficient, but it is a great springboard for making friends, but then finding context in real life for keeping friends. So doing some of that.
Yeah. I think, along those lines, also is, what like helping each other out in, like, once you know these guys, and you know their problems, you know their like, let's say financial or employment problems. If you have a strong business, you should consider hiring that person.
Yeah.
Like you could, if you know the guy and you know he's a good guy and he has a potential to be competent at that job, you might have another hire that you're looking at and you think that guy knows what he's doing, but he's also not a Christian,
right?
Or he is a Christian, but he's not aligned ideologically or politically. Then hire the guy who you think has potential for that job. Bring him into that employment. And build that up. I mean, if someone is doxxed and they lose their job,
right,
find some way, if you can, to hire that guy.
Right.
If you know a guy who has a lot of potential to be a sort of influencer, but if he becomes an influencer, he'll get fired. Well, maybe that's a good guy for you to hire, so that he can become.
So that he can do that with.
He can do that with his own name and all that. So there's just all these different ways that if you think of all of the various resources you have. I mean, the ability to employ a guy is a resource.
Huge resource.
And so think about that. And this also brings up the fact that, like, pursue, like you've emphasized before, like pursue wealth, pursue your vocation, be the best you can be at that, and see that as a means for you to help the common good, which is opposed to the good we have, the sort of good we have today. So orient all those things around that.
Yep. And also doing
that's
that.
How people do. That's how just like the average person who doesn't have fancy degrees or cameras and lights can make. I mean, really, any sort of movement or any kind of change that happens, it happens because there's a lot of regular guys doing ordinary things. Like there's always the extraordinary. Like you got the big figure, you got the name, you got the great man, but it's those little guys who are like, being the foot soldiers for the movement.
Yeah. It won't work without him. Right. One of the ways that I've, real quick, I was going to say the same kind of concept of providing protection and impunity and those kinds of things at a vocational level. If you are a business owner, by hiring a guy who it's not just a charity, like he will work hard, he'll do a good job, he's a good Christian man, but the world would hate him, not because he's objectively a bad guy, but the world will malign him, and when I say the world, sadly, I mean many evangelicals as well. They would just say, oh, he's a terrible person.
They might be the worst.
They might be the worst, probably will be. And so so you can provide, you can be a shield and provide protection as a business owner. You can also do that, and it's sad that this even has to be done, but I think it bears saying. You can also do that as a pastor. It's like one way to push Christian nationalism further is we need guys, business owners on the right. We also need pastors on the right. And you would think that they of course pastors are on the right. Not really. Like you actually need, because here's the thing, like Stephen Wolfe needs a church, and I won't share any details, but the fact that I'm not going to share any details illustrates the point that I'm making, right? Like
I am a part of a church, by the way.
You are, of course. But my point is, But the fact
member of a church,
you could not go to any church, sadly, and I think that's terrible. That's a shame. And so what I'm saying is that like we need Christian nationalist pastors, even so that guys who are good Christian men. But by normie evangelical standards are viewed as monsters. Now, hear me, it's imperative that when evangelicals call you a monster, that you actually are not.
Right.
There are real monsters in the world. There are real men who are terrible men. So don't be one of them. But for those who are labeled as monsters, not just by the left, but even by conservative, neo-conservative evangelical Christians, those guys need churches. So those guys need to be employed. So we need Christian nationalist bosses, business owners. They also need churches. We need Christian nationalist pastors who are willing to say, I'll take that young guy and not that he can do whatever he wants, but I'm going to walk with him. I'm going to shepherd him, and I'm not going to crush him. And he can be a member in good standing in our church. So that's another
I think
thing.
I think that's crucial, and I've said it many times that the pastor doesn't have to be an expert on politics,
right?
Nor does he have to preach on politics all the time or all those things.
You prefer that he doesn't.
Well,
I've changed, if you were a member of my church, you'd probably be like, all right, Joel, nice try.
I've changed a little bit on that. That's mainly because I thought most pastors are horrible in politics. So,
right.
But I've changed a little bit on that. But I think one of the most important roles of a pastor is it's like a chaplain in the military. So that the chaplain in the military is not in the chain of command, as a chaplain, but he ministers to the people as they're doing their war fighting. Mm-hmm. So he's not saying, hey, saw gunner, go there and that's your target. He is, once that, that mission's complete, he's ministering to that guy. So I think a Christian nationalist pastor, or a pastor involved in this, would make sure, first of all, that he would affirm and he would affirm their desire for a Christian nation. That he would affirm their work in whatever capacity they do it. He'd say, what you're doing, it is good to desire and work for, the heritage of faith that America has, and to work for a Christian nation. It is good. What a lot of pastors do now, and you're very well aware of this, is they'll say you care too much and you shouldn't care. And it's a zero-sum thing. The more you care about politics, the less you care about Jesus. And so they act as then a means to inaction, to actually to stifling that courage and that desire to bring stuff to bring that about.
It's the war on masculinity and ambition. is, I think, in many ways innately masculine. And so part of being holy, to be a holy, righteous, virtuous Christian is to, we have conflated righteousness, holiness with femininity.
Yeah.
And so what does it look like for a man to be a good Christian man? Well, it looks like having a quiet and gentle spirit, not being overly ambitious, being subservient, being submissive. And like basically you would just take every verse in the Bible that is directed towards women and prescribe that to men.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so my point is a Christian nationalist pastor, well, one thing what is a Christian nationalist pastor? One thing would be he's a masculine pastor. And by virtue of being a masculine pastor, he's a pastor who doesn't throw cold water on ambition.
Right. Yeah, and by not doing that, you affirm their ambition for that. But I think the right pastoral role is saying, look, I affirm that, but let me make sure that that this is not preventing you from the highest good, that is Christ. You can get caught up in the internet wars.
That's true.
And you can get so caught up that you no longer read the word, you no longer pray. And the pastor should be, I'm not telling you not to do those things, but make sure that your first heart is for eternal life. It is for Christ. So it's like, that's like the chaplain thing. It's like, it's not only to encourage you in the work you know how to do, it's also to feed your soul at the same time.
Reorient you away from that work, not to disparage it. So ambition is good, but to also remind you are an eternal creature.
Right. And it's not they don't present it as a zero-sum game. You care more about politics. If you care about politics, you don't care about Jesus. It's saying it's good that you care about politics, but don't let that kind of cloud your chief end, which is eternal life in Christ. And so that's really important for a pastor. And there are, I know young guys, and they're in seminary now, and they're kind of keeping their heads down. We've talked about this a little bit. And that they see that, like they see in the internet world, a lot of young guys who are very ambitious and on fire for the political side, but they do fear that is a problem for them with regard to spiritual things. And they want to be the pastor who says, yeah, great, do that for Christ, but also don't neglect your soul in your pursuit of these earthly goods that are good, but don't lose focus on those other things. Right.
It makes me smile because I don't know why, but I couldn't get out of my mind the picture of John Doyle. Do you know who that is?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've talked to him some offline, and he's a good guy. What's the show? Heck Off Commie, I think is the name of his YouTube channel. Yeah. And he's super sharp and super young and super sharp and has some great stuff. And but I remember like in one video, it was leading up to he's like, he loves Trump, and his instincts were right on Trump from the beginning all the way back in 2015. And but heading towards the election, he did like a video where he was like, look, your soul matters. And this matters and that matters. He said, but right now it doesn't. We're coming up to an election. If you're not on Twitter 14 hours a day, meme posting, then you are not a patriot. He said, you need to be having 17 Anon accounts. And, and he was saying it tongue in cheek, but it was really funny. Like, but he was sarcastically, he was saying, we need to be serious. We need to win. But he was acknowledging in a sarcastic way that, but you can't obsess. You need to be disciplined. You need to be ambitious, but you can't obsess. One other thing I was going to say, so we need the business owners. We need the pastors. I said this, I don't know if you remember this, but when we were at the Ogden conference, I got in trouble with this. Right Wing Watch, I think I clipped it out, but I said, I want to win. And I said, and I don't know how to win without seizing power. And so I want to see Christians seize power, which is not inherently good or bad, but then wield power as a tool in righteous, good ways for the good. And what does that look like? Well, wielding power righteously looks like a blessing to your friends and crushing your enemies. And everybody lost their mind. But I said it like, other guys say it, but I'll say things very, very matter of fact, and I was like, yes, I want to crush my enemies. And so then later I did like a post, because I got in trouble for it. And so I did a post where I fleshed out, I can't remember 4 or 5 different ways of crushing enemies in a Christianly manner. And so I said, like, now when I say crushing enemies, I don't mean in the middle of the night cutting, somebody's brake lines. But what I do mean is depending on your vocation. And like, I think of, 1 Corinthians, like each man should remain in whatever station of life when the Lord called him. And I know that particularly that's pertaining to singleness and marriage and marital status. But there's also a sense in which like even like Roman centurions, and soldiers went to Jesus and they asked the question like, what is like, hey, we want to be your disciples too. What does Christianity mean for us? And it's almost, you can almost read out of it, it's not explicitly there, but you can always put yourself in their shoes. They're probably expecting, if I had to guess, they're probably expecting, like, it's almost like baked into the question is, not just what does Christian life look like for Roman soldiers, but it's almost like they're asking, is Christian life compatible with being like, basically they're asking, not just how can we be Roman soldiers Christianly, but they're probably implicitly in that they're asking, do we need to quit our job? And the fascinating, thing is that Jesus' response is a bit, surprising. That he's like, he doesn't say, oh, you're Roman soldiers? Well, what does it look like to be my disciple? It looks like, giving your resignation, and finding a better vocation. But Jesus doesn't say that. And then he begins to talk about how you can remain even in that station, in a Christian manner and being content with your wages and not extorting and, these kinds of things. And so what does it mean to crush your enemies as a blessing to the righteous and a terror to those who do evil, based off of vocation? Well, if you're the civil magistrate, it means wielding the full weight of the law in a just way, according to, and the ways that the law is compatible with the law of God, against those who do evil. But then if you're not a civil magistrate, that's, so that's in the legal system. If you're not a civil magistrate, as an employer, and you can economically crush enemies, even not just as an employer, but even just as a patron. And where do we spend our money? Yeah. Right? Like voting with your pocketbook. Another way to that I sought to crush my enemies was moving out of California, moving to Texas. I thought no, I don't want to give them another cent of my tax money. I don't want it to go to California. I want to see California change or implode. And then I can send my grandkids back. It's beautiful. We'll take back over the land later on. Yeah. But they need to be knocked down a rung. Mm-hmm. And so you can do it with geographically where you live, and then politically, even thinking. I was like, okay, so you could leave California or New York or whatever and move to a deep red state, but you also family should be taken into account and jobs and all those kind of things. But if all things are equal, why not move to a swing state? I think it was like 46,000 votes in 2020 that Trump lost, allegedly lost by. If you look at 4 of the 7 swing states that ended up going for Biden, 4 of them would have been enough in the Electoral College for him to win. And the combined popular vote in those 4 states, the combined margins of all 4 of them together that Biden, allegedly won by, was less than 50,000. So it's and yet there were 6 million Trump votes in California, compared to 12 million for Biden. So it's like 6 million down the toilet, and I was one of them because we left in December, right after I wasted my vote for Trump in California. And so, but my point is, that's another way to crush your enemies is move to Michigan or Pennsylvania, and vote red, start a business and hire Christians and not liberals and leftists as a patron, and how not just how you do wages, but how you spend money, like patron good businesses. And if you're a civil magistrate, using the weight of the law as a pastor, letting not disparaging right-wing young men in your church, and like guys who believed what every Christian believed 100 years ago, not excommunicating them. In all these ways, these are practical ways to work towards Christian nationalism. Yeah.
And the topic of crushing your enemies, the thing about the right that is very masculine is that we'll just straight up say it.
Right.
Like we will say that politics is in part a friend-enemy distinction.
It is.
We'll say that up front. Whereas all the people who deny that, they practice that just as much.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just recently that hoax thing that this just happened
On AMREF?
Yeah, on American Reformer through James Lindsay. It was, of course, dragged, and it was actually embarrassing for Lindsay and all the people who promoted it.
Right, because he ended up changing like 90%, right?
Yeah, it was like 95% change. Like it was silly. Like a bunch of very large, even non-Christian Twitter accounts just dragged him and took him out. And even today I saw that there's like Tim Pool did a whole video on it attacking him. So yeah, American Reformer, it was actually a boost for them. But nevertheless, all the people who say that they denounce the friend-enemy distinction are practicing the friend-enemy distinction.
Right.
They use a hoax from an atheist in which he lies about his identity, lies about the content really, because it's really not the Communist Manifesto, changed to look like it's right-wing.
Right.
It's really just a right-wing document with very little overlap with the with Marx's.
But the leftist group Babylon Bee wasted no time.
Yeah, like
at all. Like Seth Dillon and Joel Berry, that they couldn't even contain themselves. The bubbling up, joy of like, yes.
It wasn't just those guys.
We've got a chance to crush Christians.
It was like the mid-level Big Eva guys like Samuel James and Samuel Say, and some other people who are very explicitly denounce that frenemy, but they're willing to use that sort of tactic to take down their enemies. So even like it's just the rule of thumb. It's just a solid principle that the people who most denounce friend-enemy distinction are the least trustworthy people, or trustworthy in the fact that they will seek to crush their enemies.
Guys,
and so the left is doing it. The liberals are doing it. The classical liberal Christians are doing it. The centrists, the moderates, whatever they are, center right, they're all doing it. They just they moralize about the friend, but we're actually very clear up front about it. And this is the thing about the right; it's very masculine, saying this is what we're up to.
It's also honest.
It's
the right
honest,
is honest.
Yeah, and we do it through like they say it's unprincipled, but we do it through principled means.
Yes,
so it's
that's why I wanted to flesh out when I said crush your enemies.
Yeah.
If you're a civil magistrate, if you're a business owner, this is how you do it in the household. This is how you do it in the church. None of it is vigilantism. None
of it is like dragging people out of their cars or raiding their houses or, like doing illegal things or abusing the law. Or none of it is let's violate the Constitution. And none of that. It's none of that stuff.
But you can do it. Like for instance, remember when. Somebody said Charles Haywood did a good job on this, but like somebody said something about like, not only like I wish that Trump with the assassination attempt, I wish it had been successful and he had died, but also celebrated the person who did die, the death of a conservative Trump supporter, and was like, good. And it's like, this dude's a firefighter, he's a husband, he's a father, and this person online celebrated it, and they were an employee, I think at Home Depot or something like that, or Lowe's, and it went viral, and they got fired, and like clockwork, a bunch of people, even on the right, came out like, that's too far. Like, I feel bad for them. And Charles Haywood did a good job and said, no, you don't just need hearts for revival. You need stomachs for revival. Yeah. This is lawful. This person did not get beat up. This person wasn't assaulted in the proper sphere. Their employer was shamed by the objectively shameful thing that this person said publicly, and the employer wanted to get away from it and fired them. That's great. The left has been doing that for decades. Yeah. And if the right doesn't have the stomach,
the right does have the stomach for it, as we've talked before. If it's a racist, they'll absolutely celebrate.
They have the stomach for it to do to their own.
Yeah, to do it to their own, and to use the left to do it. Basically, we talked about that already, but. They do have the stomach for it, right? But it's when it's the left, then it's like, oh, my moralism comes out and my moral witness thing. It's always so much of the rhetoric of the evangelical moderate or third way or center right is really just moralizing to appeal to the left. Yeah, and so that moralizing can be, if it's a left wing person who gets fired, you're going to then feel sad. If it's a right-wing person who gets fired, it's like, they had it coming to them. It's all their fault, and now they can drive a truck or whatever. I mean, it's the same thing every single time. Yeah. But anyway,
Yeah.
The other thing,
I was going to say real quick with the friend enemy distinction. You know, the Carl Schmitt, like, he's a Nazi. Like, yeah, Nazis drink water, and so do I. You know, he's right. He's right about that. The friend enemy distinction. This is what I've noticed though. The people who deny the friend enemy distinction, as you already said, I just want to add one extra component because it's like an unbreakable rule. It's always true, and it's helpful to be aware of. The people who deny the friend enemy distinction, and they say that's a terrible thing, and we deny that. Number one, they practice it religiously to a T. So they do practice a friend enemy distinction while publicly denying it, and their public denial of the friend enemy distinction does not mean they don't practice it. They do. What you can take away from that as a guarantee, you can take it to the bank, is if they deny the friend enemy distinction, it doesn't mean that they don't actually practice it. All it means is that they do have friends, they do have enemies, and you are the enemy. And that's important to know.
Yep.
So every time Samuel say, I like Samuel say.
That is crucial.
I do. Like, I spoke at a conference with him. He's a brother in Christ. We'll worship Jesus together in eternity. He's a great guy. I wish, slow to write. I wish he was a little slower to write, but he's a great guy, but his instincts are wrong and certainly politically wrong. But he very much practiced, like, as soon as this article came out, or not article, but the event unfolded that James Lindsay had pulled a fast one on American Reformer with the Communist Manifesto, even though he changed it 95%. A guy who literally his handle is slow to write. Like, it was like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That he came out on Twitter and
probably most of these guys have
and
not
he
actually
said
read
in a
Marx.
mocking manner, because he's always like, his whole thing is like, I'm very respectful. And even when I disagree, I'm very respectful, sir. He always says like, it's one thing to speak that way, but he like will type out on Twitter, dear sir, and I'm like, who says sir on Twitter? But anyways, but with this one, there's no sir. It was literally, it was mocking. He came out and the post, I can't quote it exactly, but it was something like, it was retweeting James Lindsay. And it was like, protect this man at all costs. He exposed the woke right and made them look like the fools that they are. And again, this is without getting any of the facts. Yeah. Like, he ultimately made himself look foolish. Has Samuel read
the Communist Manifesto? Maybe he has. And if he did, it was college.
I haven't.
Most of these guys, like, laughing at this wouldn't even know the first thing of what it says.
Yeah.
They just think, oh, James Lindsay's back at it again, but it's in the end, it's just embarrassment to them. But these guys wouldn't have caught it.
But that's my point, is
the average person would not have caught it.
Right.
And even like people use the opening line or some version of the opening line of the Communist Manifesto in writings all the time. I've done it before when I've written something. Really? Everyone knows it. They know it's kind of it's a little catchy little phrase. And so using that's not out of the ordinary. So then if you change 95% of the rest, you're not going to notice it, even if you're a Marx expert.
Right.
So anyway.
But the point is, everybody practices the friend enemy distinction. Yeah. Those who deny it do practice it. And the only thing that they're confirming is that you're their enemy.
Yeah.
And they will they will waste no time to mock you, to expose whatever they think is a failure for you. I mean, that's part of the reason why my clips go viral, but there's a two-part process to it. One is because of actual leftists that really hate Christ and hate conservatives and hate Christians. But if it was just that, people wouldn't really know. They wouldn't know who I am. They wouldn't have heard of Joel Webbon. It's a two-prong approach. Right Wing Watch or Mother Jones or something like that. It's leftist. They pick me up. But what gives it staying power to where I don't just go viral for an afternoon, but for a week or a month, is all the Joel Berrys and Samuel Says and those guys who then retweet Right Wing Watch. Mm-hmm. Like, these leftists that hate Christ and hate Christians and wish we were dead, I joyfully will side with them if it means crushing Joel Webbon, because they do have enemies, they do have friends. The problem is they just have the wrong ones. Right Wing Watch, friend. Joel Webbon, Christian pastor, enemy.
Yeah. Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to mention before our time's out is, if you have aspirations, so younger guys, if you're in high school or you're in college, it's not necessarily wise for you to jump out into the fray with your own name and start doing these things.
That's good.
What would be best is if you say, I want to be a statesman or politician, or I want to be a pastor, or I want to be a military officer, or I want to be this and that. It's wise for you, if you have an anonymous account, have good OPSEC, but also have that long-term goal that eventually I will be a leader in an institution.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll have built up a network of like-minded people. Because that's one of the things just Christians, broadly speaking, or especially Protestants, have not done well on. And if they have not entered the institutions, and they have not entered in the institutions, one, as Protestants, as Christians, and they have not prepared to lead for the right.
Right.
And so pursue that. Like that should be, if you're in seminary right now, you are among a bunch of seminary professors who be very good at what they do, but they're not going to understand if you start bringing up Christian nationalism and other stuff you and I say in class in ways that position you on that side. It's going to be harder for you then to get into that presbytery or whatever church, unless your maybe Baptists have an easier time. I don't know. But especially in the Presbyterian world, you have to come under the care and eventually get licensed and get a call. And that the presbytery has a significant role in that. And so you kind of,
you could be blacklisted.
You don't have to lie. Yeah. You don't have to lie. And this has happened to people where they're actually ministers, and then something happened and they're out, and now getting back in to that denomination into a presbytery is extremely difficult because they say we don't want that sort of person in. So I'm not saying lie. I'm just saying you have to be the kind of normie guy for a while.
Yeah.
But not just seminary and in the church, but also in all other fields, vocations. You want to be a white collar guy. You want to get in the corporate world. You want to do business. You're going to have to probably wait a little while. So be smart, be wise.
Especially if you want to go into politics. I've thought about that. It's too late.
But it's too late for. Yeah,
I thought like it would be cool to run for public office. And I'm like, wait a second, I'm Joel Webbon. I have like a history, internet history, a mile long of all the things. You know what I mean?
We both do.
Like it's possible, but the Overton would have to shift a great deal.
Yeah.
For Joel Webbon to
win
an election.
I've thought like locally, I want to get on development boards, school boards, things like that. And even if these people were willing, I'd hesitate because I'd be like, well, I don't want to harm the institution because of my name at this point.
Right.
But I wouldn't be considered even for voluntary boards in my county, that if I wanted to, let alone county commissioner or anything like that, for that reason. And that's the sort of fate someone you and I have to deal with, that we have to be the people with the microphones or writing.
Because somebody has to be outspoken.
But someone else does have to, right.
But we don't need everyone outspoken.
Not everyone has to do what we do. And that's good. That means that the other people can kind of lay low and get the credentials, get the institutional competence. That's a big thing too. Is like you can't just show up to like, I'm going to be in the school board or I'm going to be in this. You don't know anything. Like right. you have to work up the ranks. Even if you like suddenly get on like a state legislature, there's a lot to learn. Like if you don't already have an involvement in politics, that immediate gap in knowledge, even if you have all of your ideological political principles in a row, now you're in a whole new institution with its own rules, its own dynamics, its own culture, and you have to be able to navigate that. So yeah, so just learn your job, learn your vocation, learn the institution, and just wait for your time to come.
Right. That's super important because I've had to tell young guys aspiring, particularly to pastoral ministry, because they're like, well, you're outspoken and you're a pastor. And they think that that's like the norm. And what they don't realize is like, I have to remind them and say like, but guys, you don't like, one, you probably don't want to be me. And two, you have to recognize like that even if you want to be me, your chances are slim. Like the path that I took is a very unorthodox path. And what I don't mean like theologically, but I didn't go to seminary. I'm not a part of any denomination. I never got a phone call from a church saying, hey, we'd like for you to come. I had to plant a church twice now, starting from my living room, with zero pay. It's literally just the grace of God and the fact that I happen to be gifted in terms of communication, that like I was able to speak in such a way and use, media and to eventually draw people to where I ended up being successful, and I was able to accumulate enough critical mass. But the average guy, there's a reason there are certain designated paths. Like there are paths to be a doctor, there are paths to be an engineer, and there are paths to be a pastor. And sure, there are maybe some exceptions. Not so much, hopefully not with the doctor thing, but with the pastor thing. But there are exceptions. The exceptions are the exceptions. The norm is the norm.
Yeah.
You don't want to make the footnote the headline, and the headline the footnote. And so most pastors go to seminary. They get an MDiv. They get a call from a pre-existing church. Most church plants fail. They're not successful. So you're actually getting a call. Somebody wants you in a pre-existing church. So you have to be accepted by a seminary, finish a seminary. If you're not Baptist, then you have to be ordained. Then you have to get an external call from. And so for all those things to happen, and people say, well, okay, so Joel, you did it, but as a church planter and as a Baptist and independent. But other guys have done it. Joel, you're not the only guy, like Doug Wilson did it, and he's a Presbyterian. Yeah, he created his own presbytery. Doug Wilson is an exception also. You just have to recognize, and I'm not even dogging that. That's, fine, whatever. But I'm just saying these are extraordinary examples. And to think well, Joel did it, or you might think of Ogden. It's Ogden did it. Yeah, but Brian took over a Calvary Chapel church in extraordinary circumstances. He was the music intern guy as a 17-year-old, I believe. Very young, and was part-time staff as a pastoral / music intern worship guy. And then in his early 20s, there was no other leaders present in the church. There was a sudden and tragic moral failure from the pastor. Brian was the only guy on the scene. And Calvary Chapel happens to be one of those denominations where the individual church actually owns the building and gets to make the decisions. There's no diocese or anything above it in an ecclesiastical formal sense. And so Brian he just happened to be the only guy available, and that's how he got his pastoral gig. If it wasn't for, but that is not the norm. And so my point is every single one of these guys that you look at, it's well, he did it. He did. Every single one of them is an exception. Yeah. But for every one of those, there's 100 other pastors that went the normal route of seminary, getting a call, being examined, being ordained, and if they were out as outspoken as Brian or Eric or me or you, or they wouldn't have a snowball's chance in hell.
Well, I guess I would be a sort of exception as well. Is that I'm older than most of you guys, and I became, I'm not famous, but known in a certain circle when I was 38, 39. Yep. And before that, I spent a good deal in school. But yeah, I was working. I was in the Army. And they think, well, Wolfe can somehow make an income. Somehow he survives. No one actually knows how I make my money. But it's largely passive income from the times that I was working full time. So profitable. Selling books. Yeah, there's a lot of money in books. Yeah, every time you buy a book, I get to feed my kid half an ice cream,
or a pack of ramen noodles.
Yeah, yeah, or not even a pack of gum. Anyway,
didn't you say it was less than $1 a book?
It depends on who's if
it's through Amazon.
It depends on who's buying it, and it's actually more than that now. But anyway, but for me, I can do what I do because I have passive income from, I own 4 houses. So that's how everyone knows. I was making money. So I own houses and I have rental income from that. And so I'm that where I can do what I want. I could spend half my day outside building a deck or chopping wood, and then the other part of the day, typing or whatever, or doing these things. So I'm kind of that unique situation. So yeah, people shouldn't say, well, Wolfe can write these things and make money. So yeah, you have to really then, for the vast majority of people, you have to expect that you're going to be 38, 40, 45. You have to play the long game.
Yes.
I don't know if I played a long game, but that's the fact. I'm 41.
Yeah.
You're 30 something, 38. Okay. So yeah, in order to do these things, you have to do the work.
You played
can't
the long
start off
game
at 24.
intentionally. You were quiet. I played the long game unintentionally in the providence of God, by simply being dumb and not coming into these views until later in life.
Okay.
Like, you know what I mean? So the guys that we're talking to we're assuming guys who have come into these views now and are going to have to sit on them.
They're on the, right. And that's harder because I didn't come into these views until, I don't know, several years ago. So so if you're 22, it's hard, but just like that anonymous account's the best you got at this point, and just play the game for a while.
Right.
Don't be stupid.
And that's don't
lose your job. It's not compromise. It's just
that's
basic
strategy.
wisdom.
It's shrewd.
It's strategy. Yeah.
It's innocent as doves, but is cunning as serpents. We're called to be like that. And one of the reasons why the left always wins is, for one, they don't have any category of compromise because they don't have any virtues or so there's no way to compromise, if you're just evil. But conservatives, obviously we have standards, we have principles, we have virtues. Like we're held accountable under God. We're all going to have to stand before Him one day. So we're not saying, lie, cheat, and steal. We're not saying that, but we are saying that there is still a very clear line. There's I would say even a pretty wide chasm between deceit and dishonesty and sin versus strategy, shrewd, wise. And there is a way of having a clear conscience before God and being a righteous, good man, and being shrewd without being a coward. That doesn't make you a coward. Wanting to feed your family does not make you a coward.
Right.
So,
and there's ways to have conversations with normie people where you just ask questions and you say, I heard this, or I read this, and what do you think about that? And there's ways to have a public presence that doesn't damage you long term.
Right.
And the same thing in a seminary class. Like you could be like, Calvin says this in his Institutes about the civil magistrate. Doesn't this argument seem to work? Or don't you think your argument is this and that? And that doesn't, that you're just being a good seminary student at that point and dealing with arguments. So so you don't have to come out and say, well, Wolfe said this, and Wolfe is, of course, he's got a PhD, and or don't say that, please. But anyway, there's smart ways to go about conversations, both online, Facebook, Twitter, without damaging your potential long term. Just imagine that your potential, like most people, and this is just true for even the corporate world. Like you hit the top in your 40s or early 50s, and most of the time you're just playing the game. And the same thing on the political side as well. Just play the game till you get that opportunity. Right,
and that's a great place to land the plane, because the one thing I wanted to add to that is, not only are we advocating for a virtuous, uncompromising position of waiting and playing the game, but you said it briefly for just a moment. It's not just that this is wise to wait so that you can have maximum leverage later, once you've arrived and you have institutional power, you've accumulated wealth, and then you can be, bolder and more pointed and outspoken. So it's not just that this is necessary now, awaiting now, so that I can be loud and effective with power later. It's not just that, but in passing, what you said briefly is it's a win-win. It's a double win, because right now, even though you have to be tempered, and you as a young man may be frustrated by that because you'd like to be more outspoken, you have to be tempered. Well, here's the thing: your temperance now, not only is it patience that will set you up better for later, but your temperance now is actually oftentimes going to be used in the providence of God to win people, not just later, but now that me and you can't win. So you're listening to Stephen, Wolfe, and Joel, and the normie hates us and won't give us the time of day. They're not going to listen to us, but you're listening to us, but then intentionally, for your own self-preservation, are refusing to say things exactly like us. So you're putting a normie filter on Wolfe and Joel and other guys, but you're in a crafty, careful way disseminating information that you've heard from us, and you're doing it for two reasons. One, to self-preserve, because you can't oust yourself so that you can be effective later, but also in being filtered now, you're able to reach a whole market of people, the majority of people
That's a good
who
point,
you and
yeah.
I can't actually, they won't give us the time of day, but they're listening to you because you filtered it. So you filtered it to preserve yourself, but it actually becomes a great benefit to them because now they're hearing distilled versions of Wolfe and Joel and these kinds of thinkers, and it's starting the thought process for them. And then turns out, you know, it may take 6 months, it may take 2 years, but all of a sudden your normie buddy is, 6 months later, he's watching the Lone Bulwark, you know, and like,
right. You're preparing the ground. There's people who are so deeply in like their political socialization that it takes time. Like there's different. Yeah. This is why I don't actually go after people who are more, I guess, more to my left. It's like there's a way to...
There's a pipeline.
Yeah. There's a way to kind of cultivate ideas in someone who would be have a kind of a weak self-awareness and weak will to deal with those, that you can start kind of kindling that so that they can, so they can later on be receptive.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in. We hope that this series has been helpful for you, especially this final episode, trying to be a little bit more practical and even pastoral. We hope that it's a blessing to you. And we hope that, if you can, in keeping with everything we've said thus far, don't get yourself in trouble. But in the instances where you can, we hope that you would share some of the content with a friend. So thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you in future series that we do with Right Response Ministries. And also to plug Wolfe, of course, you can buy his book, The Case for Christian Nationalism, but you also are starting some of your own media and podcasting. Where can they go?
Yeah, so it's the Lone Bulwark on YouTube. I think it's the Lone Bulwark with Stephen Wolfe. So go on there, subscribe to that. That'd be great. Cool. Also Twitter, you'll just search Stephen Wolfe and I'll probably be the first guy there.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you guys. God bless.